You're insane, he snickered. I just continued staring with hand extended. Give it or I take it, I said, remembering her overconfidence and willingness to walk at the first sniff of something being wrong. She seemed less rude now. Still don't know why that is. The hire handed it over only beneath the table, and I slowly unrolled it on my lap. It wasn't the map I expected. This was made not of parchment, but of soft cloth, woven. This took time. It was definitely genuine and old. Carefully re-rolled it, tied the ribbon back around it, and tossed it back to him, unconcerned with their side plan. Here's how it's going to work. You are the hire. I will behave as such and not shame you in front of your other hirelings. You can't pay my fee now, but I will contract myself to you anyways.
And how much is your fee?
Hissed the mage, who was unnerving me more every second. Half. Not of whatever you send me in the fighter after, but whatever you have going with this, I said, right arm tortuously bent up and pointing directly in its face. When we're done, we ditch the fighter. I'll think of something if she doesn't excuse herself. Hey, let's all go to Feltree and drink. Oh, you're going back to Argus? That's a shame. Thanks for the help. And you split everything remaining in half with me. I laid out my demands, knowing my worth. Why would I? He began. Because I will find you twice as much as you wildly speculated this trip to be worth. The void now in my throat when I didn't mean it to be. I'll be ready to go when your fighter and mage are. Fire the fake mage, or I tell them everything. And I was gone as quickly as I came. Everything, I whispered one last time, long after they thought I had disappeared into the shadow I'd come from, giving them one last startle. I'm sorry, I had to. 2 days later, the troop was ready to leave. The fighter, the real mage, the hire, and a new fourth soul. This is him, another fighter scoffed from horseback, obviously not recognizing me. He was clearly a bowman, but apparently no slouch with a two-handed sword on his back, and the short sword at his hip. Yet, he had no shield that I could see. Could he possibly do a wield? With a two-handed sword? Doubtful. It's probably just an in-case weapon. He wasn't big enough.
Yes,
hissed the mage.
The squeaky wheel.
The hire avoided my gaze, but I had said fire the fake mage. I never said do not protect yourself. This was not his first hire either. Extra muscle to keep me under control. There would be no splitting of this treasure in half. I would take my share, and that was to be it. Yes, that's what he's here for. If I'm being completely honest, I feared the well-shielded woman more. She and her spiked mace had more to prove. Never underestimate that. There's a fire there, a brilliant fire. Not like my darkening eyes, the benefit of which is that the daylight hurts less, but the night, I see even better. So far, there's no downside. It will come soon enough, for there is no give without take, not in the years I've traveled Unea. She was a Northic woman, hardy, healthy, and stronger than me on immediate observation. Any fight with her will not go easily, and definitely will not come down to a strength match. I would have to outsmart her to beat her. Her armor plating giving no space to wedge my dagger. Perhaps in that small gap between her helmet and the rest of her armor. It never fails to amuse me how reinforced fighters make themselves only to leave the absolute most vulnerable spot, the throat, open to attack from the right assailant. Him? He signed on to this? He bought whatever lie they told him without a single coin passing? He down-nosed me from the time the word thief left their mouths. Never underestimate based on word of mouth. The Northic woman had already sized me up properly. He, on the other hand, had the grin of self-proclaimed righteousness. He cannot lose, for he fights for good. Some deity or power or mistake at the last minute will save him. He's still on the looking out, Dream. It's a powerful drug to kick. We mounted up and moved until we couldn't, over and over, day after day. We eventually crossed the tamed maw about 60 marks southeast from the twice great maw. Only we went southbound this time, just skirting east into the inland sea and west of the currents that could drag us all the way back to Argus. This ferry was more expensive than any of our fees, only to reach somewhere we could have gone had we left near dock. With this constant backtracking and doubling over our steps, I was starting to believe it was the hire's desire to get us hirelings lost. As we get closer to our destination, I hear the mage's voice in my sleep, praying death upon me, preying on my very thoughts every night for the last 2 weeks now. Nearing 3 weeks gone, we came across a group of hunters, all dead, all slit from collarbone to jawbone. The troop wanted to stop and investigate, or should I say, rummage through decayed remains. "And I'm the thief," I yelled from horse mount, trying to hide what I knew, watching them pillage pockets for thread and the odd coin. "Well, something did this," our leader exclaimed. "And I guess stopping to admire their handiwork is your attempt to, what, become the next victims?" Everyone scrambled back to their horses, trying to not look horrified. But this was a grim scene that none of them wanted to be added to. If I hadn't lived it out already or knew what did this, I would be just as shaken as them. Althen had obviously returned to Morrington and made his way almost to Vorgan's Bog. Perhaps he's going to test the blade on the ball, but caught these hunters first. Or maybe he was defending a ball. I honestly cannot say. But he never liked bigotry before. Just being fair. Perhaps he stumbled on some hunters or poachers. I don't know, but I think he's gone. Our quest's true beginning was still nearly 2 weeks away. We'd been pelted by every type of weather that Unea had to offer. Vorgan's Bog, the foot-trace plateaus. I saw more natural wonders on this one quest than I had ever before. Usually our quests tend to lead a little more back into my home city. I decided to flop wherever I could. Make themselves only to leave the absolute most vulnerable spot, the threats, only to reach somewhere work as your attempt to. Poisonous bite ensures that silent current to the northwest I had ever before. Usually our quests tend to lead a little more northerly, mostly towards Galden, Varen, Feltree, the inland sea. Can't tell you how many times I've seen those, but to see Vorgan's Bog, you would have to leave Morrington by boat, traveling away from Argus, against the current to the northwest, almost all the way to the inland sea. And for what? To see the reptile men of Vorgan? Or slit some throats of some obviously unsuspecting hunters? I won't use the derogatory name that nearly everyone else uses for Vorgan's men. Most don't even know how insulting it is, and bless them, the ball couldn't understand the double meaning. But they make excellent dock workers, loyal beyond words, not afraid to get wet. They don't even possess the ability to think in double crosses. What comes out of their mouths is what is in their minds at the moment, sometimes harsh, but if you can accept them for who they are, they make excellent traveling companions. Their poisonous bite ensures that silent kills are truly silent. One bite to the neck and it's over in under 1 minute. They don't live by Both rules, so truth really is a moving scale that you can weigh on your side, like trading with a vendor and slipping a few extra painted lead coins in with your gold. Now, meeting a Vorgan in a town who is acclimated to society versus meeting one feral out in Vorgan's Bog, that's a different story. These are 6-foot reptiles that walk like men. Let that sink in. Their scaly bodies are natural armor, but you'll see a mud dragon wearing clothes or even armor like humans from time to time, speaking an interesting dialect of Unaic. No, mud dragon isn't the derogatory term. That's my poor attempt at translation of what they call themselves in their language, which I dare not try to imitate, as it requires a forked tongue and some words that sound like a box of rice shaking. Mretsetsia. That was a bad pronunciation of good morning, friend. And that wasn't a difficult one. The Foot Trace Plateaus were south of the inland sea, between the bog and the Severn Hills, and they were breathtaking. The myth is that they were once actual mountains that peeked out from the valley below our now highland perch, overlooking a sunken dale. We'd been walking the rim for 2 days, now looking down on such beauty in a valley as I've never seen. The sunrise through the clouds looked like stained glass overhead, casting gorgeous rays and shadows everywhere. So the myth goes, a race of giants were fleeing an angry deity, and they stomped the peaks flat, leaving traces of their escape in the foot-shaped prints here, but they were slaughtered before they could make it to the Severn Hills, which honestly makes no sense because the Mesna Plateaus are on the other side of the Galton Mall. Yep, the prick named a mall after himself. Are not as impressive or as many as the Foot Trace Plateaus, but the Mesna Plateaus pretty much look exactly the same. There was something there, a strange feeling, and some of the plateaus do look like footprints, but their size. What would they have eaten? What world-ending sized monster was food for these giants? See, many of these myths and stories can be figured out by simply applying logic. Just a random thought, but do you know what I love? How you can tell how big the town you're approaching is by how far away you can hear the minstrels. The best entertainers have spots reserved in the market square where they can earn more gold and silver in 30 minutes than I've earned on some near-death hires where the enchanted treasure turned out to be real. I mean, just because your hire's great-grandfather had a magic staff does not mean that anyone else buried there has anything, minus the matrimonial rings and such, or the typical coins on the eyes of some of the bodies. Well, the coins are still there, and so is the body 100 years later. What? Is the angel of death busy? Pretty sure he could get a sanguine and gather many people all at once, right? Instead of one at a time, if that was what was causing the problems. And then he could deliver all these poor souls to the afterlife. No? Then I'll be taking those rings and those coins. You can down-nose my profession, but the matrimonial ring sitting on some blushing bride's finger this very second, immaculately cleansed, of course, first by a thief like myself, and then by the shopkeep, probably for fingerprints. Made it to that trader because of me and my kind. Sold cheap enough because of the pawn I played in taking pennants on the dren. Every inch closer to the gold I needed to purchase my way into some kind of freedom, I guess. 10 pennants in a dren, 10 dren in 1 gold. A dren is our current way of saying anything equal to 1 silver coin. As stated before, a crown is 100 gold. Or what every king or queen feels their crown should be made up of, at the very least. Odd as it sounds, it isn't uncommon to find kings of men with a 2-crown crown. Anything larger is buried with the kings of old back when they were trying to compare the measure of their wealth. There, Unea's economy in the Second Era broke into its basics. We had traveled for nearly a month and a half to reach it, whatever it was. We were now far to the northwest of the Underwoods and heading towards the Everwhite Forest. I had promised myself a stop in the Underwoods on my way back. We were now west of the Severn Hills, or Severn Mountains if you prefer, as that's what they are, mountains. Here lies a paradoxical area of desert, mingled with lush jungle. Amongst the disharmony was a small village called Thurston. It was larger than even Varon, but still not a true city. Thurston is where mercenaries and such would come to hide from the bounties on their heads. There were enough mercs that no one knew who any arriving bounty hunter was after, so they would help each other out. Even if the hunter had named who they were after, everyone in Thurston uses aliases, so it wouldn't clarify anything. Even when it's assumed that Thurston is where the bounty is, hunters will weigh the risk and usually station eyes at all corners, preferring to wait for the bounty to leave Thurston before attempting capture. I'll never understand these cities and rules of men. It's not how I would do it. This is where our adventure was to begin. We resupplied and headed even further west into the ever-wide forest, a steamy, sweaty mangle of a place, trading between sludgy bog and only somewhat wet, solid lands. The mist seemingly thickening the deeper we trudged, each step taking us frustratingly closer to Galton's southern doors. Though I had never truly been to the southern doors, I didn't honestly need to. Where Argus majestically straddled the maws and spread out on either side comfortably, again, it straddled the Reston River before the maws, and now it decadently hit the shores and relaxed, unfolding gently. It kept going for quite some ways inland, where Galton started by barely spanning the very maw that bore its name and that it sat on. Galton, the founder, of course, named the maw leading to Galton, the city, and it can barely cross Galton the maw, singular. He was so sure that he was going to be the Argus of the West, yet even the massive amounts of ore that passes through its docks and doors cannot be used out here for very much of anything. Like the swamp we now find ourselves in, the waters that keep it like this are fed from the salty, boundless depths to the south. Some even believe that the salt that rusts Galton's metals is what made the earthen wood so dense, crystallizing solid the very trees, giving the woods inside and leaves their reflective shine. What do I believe? I believe of all the crazy stories I've ever heard, this one might be possible. I've never been to the underwoods. I've only held my earthen blade and my burying pipe. I quickly checked to make sure it was still in its place, safe and snug in a hidden customized slot in my backsack even Althan must have missed. Or he knew what I would do if he took it. She was there waiting. On the north side of Galton, of which I have been through, the inviting wooden and rusty steel doors said everything. We want your money, you can leave. Not one care beyond function was put into this design. The back of the great doors were iron braced for any impacts that never came or ever will, but showed obvious signs of repair. Not from damage, you see, but from simple rusting away, waiting. Notice I said doors, not gates. Gates invite a visitor in. Doors are designed specifically to keep robbers and unwanteds out and to save money. Galton simply duplicated the northern doors at the southern entrance to give an equally warm invitation to visitors. At least Argus would flirt with you. Clearly, we weren't going all the way to Galton. It would have been cheaper, faster, and easier to simply take a boat and brave the maws in the inland sea. The map that I saw had a final destination approximately 20 marks northwest of where the Severn Hills almost enters the Underwoods. So why were we 80 marks north of that and moving southwest? The mage was no longer looking as gaunt, nor kept as near to the higher as often or as much. Something here was reviving him or her. I could no longer tell, honestly. We had to slay a few mucklers, poison gas-spitting swamp dragons. Trust me, of all the dragons you could want, to fight a muckler is the best option you could run into. Some grow up to 15 feet long and can only take flight for short bursts with its serpentine body, 4 stumpy legs, and its short wings. While no one will sing songs about you, you can gain the respect of fighters by sneaking up behind one that they were about to fight straight on and slitting its throat so deep that its head falls off. It's even more impressive if you say nothing and just smile at them as you sheathe your earthen sword. Most will never see an earthen blade. Fewer will ever hold or own one. The muckler didn't know I was there. How could the fighters have known? Then, suddenly as it came, the threat was over. The bloody reptile head at their feet and the sludge and the other muckler's bodies strewn about the battlefield. It must be nearing mating season, which means we need to leave before even more show up, especially with the smell of blood now in the air. I bet I didn't look like an easily breakable twig now, did I? I just continued to stare at the male fighter, letting him know that I had heard him. I was asleep, but I had heard it. Wherever his gaze would be, there would be my eyes for at least the next hour. And I did it without drawing anyone else's attention. Unsure if it was just a dream, I kept the stare. When he finally looked away in shame, I knew I was right. The woman fighter was impressed with the kill, but he was furious that he was so impressed by the squeaky wheel. Inside his armor, he seethed. It wouldn't be the last time I saved him on this excursion. He seemed to just be drawn to traps. Traps even she, as another fighter, just shook her head at him in disappointment as I saved him. Again. In fairness, that's why they are traps. They lure you in, blending into the floor, and you stumble on a small strings trap. It doesn't have to be of superior design. It just needs to be triggered by someone more on offense than realizing your environment leaves you in need of sincere defense at all times. Poisons, blades, and swinging weights of every kind that can crush. This is the wild. And I've tried to see it all. These fighters have not, and that's fine. That is why there are thieves and why they